We were a primary special school for pupils in those days. It was called EBD. It really wasn't very complicated. It was no more clever than Dickens. We were very nice people. We were very consistent. We had boundaries. We fed them. We washed them. We cared about them. About 3 months after they started, they stopped hitting us and started to learn to read and write. But long term, we knew that we weren't changing the children. They would leave us. Their behaviour would be okay in school. Later on, we'd find out they'd been picked up by youth criminal services. By 2007, like many other EBD schools in the country, we were now an SEBD school and things were changing. Our rates of academic progress had slowed right down. We had been within mainstream ranges. We had our fair share of level 5s and 4s and 3s at year 6, but that was beginning to change. We were still teaching in the same way. We were outstanding teachers, we were told many times, but our children weren't learning so much. We also lost our sense of community. We had various children turning up. We had the Tiggers, who are delightful and highly reciprocal, but by Friday afternoon, you really just want them to sit down and be quiet for 10 minutes. We had the whirling dervishes, who tour around the school bringing chaos to whichever room they happen to be in. And we had the Barts, who are actually my favourite, but they are quite tricky to work with because they can set up and take away the whole class from you. And then we had this bunch of children in the middle who we had no idea what they were. They seemed okay, they looked okay, but stuff happened around them that was really very tricky. And behaviour became highly challenging. Highly challenging to the point that our caretaker was such good friends with the local window company that he was invited to their Christmas do. Nobody could tell us how to address these needs. They could give us strategies to get around them, but that wasn't our job. It didn't work. So we kept on doing more. We did more sanctions, took more playtimes away, did detentions. We did more rewards. Anybody who sat on a chair and finished an English lesson got whatever reward they wanted. We did more teaching. The children who weren't making progress with reading and writing, we took them out and did more reading and writing with them. We tried to do more fun as a community. There's a good memory of a particular whole school trip to the Science Museum where the police were really quite entertained. We were very nice. We were very reasonable adults. We had very consistent boundaries. We kept on reinforcing them. And we did more talking therapies, more circle time, more SEAL, more buddy systems, more telling the children, but we like you. If only you could stop doing that, you could have friends. Nothing changed. In fact, it got worse. There was less progress, less behaviour, and the staff started to feel really de-skilled. Now, recruitment is a problem now. It was also a problem then. Luckily for us, we had an EP called Laura Warren, who introduced us to Alice, and we got involved in some research into something called callous unemotional traits at the time. That explained to us a whole group of children, but really importantly for us and long-term future of the school was we were introduced to this idea of executive functions and the idea of equifinality. Now that's really important to us. We could never explain why there were children who had far more significant emotional trauma, far more disruptive home lives, but were doing very well in mainstream school. Why were we having children where maybe one sibling was the head girl and the other sibling was with us? And suddenly, things began to make more sense. It was a bit of a jumping off the cliff moment, though. As soon as things make sense, you have to look at what's not working in your school. We realised that our children couldn't link cause and effect, and they certainly couldn't delay gratification. So a whole load of our bedrock just had to be got rid of. We stopped talking so much. We stopped explaining. We stopped counselling. We got rid of sanctions, time out, telling off, pointing out how they were making other people feel, and thank God we got rid of restorative justice. We got rid of medium-term rewards, that wonderful thing of Friday afternoon golden time. The same children earned it every week, the same children didn't earn it every week. We started giving really specific needs-designed feedback straight away. So feedback like, you get rid of your sanctions, so what do you do if a child doesn't look ready to go out to play? Well, you tell them, I know you want your playtime, I need to see this, this and this for you to think that it's okay for you to go out to play. And you give immediate mini rewards. Haribo do owe me a fortune. Then we looked at what would take our place. If you get rid of your standard practice in a school, you are left with a very, very big void. If we knew they weren't making academic progress for the same reasons that they weren't making progress behaviourally, what do you do about it? How do you teach? And what do you teach? The national curriculum at that point, to get past level 3 in English and maths, or actually year 2 expectations as it is now, you have to be able to infer, deduce, organise, work systematically, filter out irrelevant information, notice what you do need to use. And then we had a problem organisationally. Some of our staff at the time wanted and needed reciprocal relationships. A lot of our children couldn't do the other side of that reciprocal relationship. Some staff found it really difficult to adapt their delivery of the curriculum into that teaching forensically model, knowing exactly how your children learn and then teaching that way, not the way you've always done it. Some teachers felt completely de-skilled. They had to prove that they were having an impact on the children, and they couldn't prove it. And we'd also removed the crutches from a few of the staff who wanted to be in control. They had to use their sanctions to prove that they had power in the classroom. In terms of the children, we had a problem because we had a class of 8 year 4s. Notice there's one of them missing because he always was missing. He was very rarely in a class at this point. So you've got child A's ASD. He wants no change. He wants reduced communication and low stimulation. He wants his lessons quiet, organised and in boxes of ideas. Child B is ADHD. He wants constant novelty, constant stimulation. He's going to bounce around the classroom a lot, getting on that child A's nerves. Child C's ASD, he doesn't notice or adapt to any new information that comes along, so it doesn't matter how many times you look at him with a cross face because he's tapping his pencil and annoying everybody else, he's not going to pick it up. Child D is speech, language and communication. He needs loads of visuals to go with his words, but if you give him loads of visuals, child B gets overloaded and child A leads the classroom. Child E is good old-fashioned EBD. He wants to be friends with everybody. The ASD children don't like that. So, the specialist learning curriculum was born. We decided if our children had deficits in attentional control, inhibitory control and working memory, we teach them. We would teach them systematically, discreetly. That would lead them to have learning how to have goal-oriented thinking skills, how to recognise emotions in themselves and others, how to monitor their own levels of arousal, and how to respond to those levels of arousal. We wanted to teach it systematically and discreetly, but we know if you take a child out to do an intervention, the child will make fantastic progress within that intervention, but then not generalise it into real life. So we teach working memory discreetly, but then it's also present in every single lesson. So if you want to teach a set of vocabulary in geography, you do a working memory exercise with the vocabulary, or the pictures or the symbols that you want to use at the beginning of the lesson. We teach them really specifically to select, use, and disregard information and concepts through the task. That inhibitory control is not all about physical and what they're doing with their body. It's about teaching them to recognise. Sometimes you have to stop thinking about something and think about something you don't want to. Or if you're doing a reading comprehension, you've got to filter out a load of information that you don't need. We also taught the children to take quiet time, which is not time out. It's about finding the right activity to use to get yourself organised so that you can effectively learn. That helped us find a common language to use with therapists. We had speech and language therapists and occupational therapists who were really good at their job, but their job is to look at a certain field. We found a different way of working with them. We found the crossover. So with a speech and language therapist, we found the connection that if you've got a poor working memory, chances are you've got poor word finding difficulties. That impacts on you socially. It also impacts on you in terms of learning. CAMS, we got so far with, but they are under their own pressures and they're stuck in a system which is largely dependent on talking therapies for children of our age in our area. So the children with spiky profiles didn't form attachments in an organised way. It wasn't necessarily to do with early childhood experience, although some of it was, but you couldn't work with them in the standard way. And we were teachers. We did need something to hold on to. So we created levels or expectations. We have a set of criteria against 6 levels for every single area of the specialist curriculum. So attentional control, inhibitory control, working memory, emotional recognition and regulation, and goal-oriented thinking. That allows us to actually track the progress the children are making against those key areas, as well as academic progress. And we quite often see that they will make progress in these areas, and then the next term we'll see the progress show up academically. And we had to involve the children. There is no point in doing things to our children because they won't do it with you. They came up with the idea of the stop button to mean inhibitory control. They all know there is a stop button in their brain which they can use to stop themselves, to filter out information, or to stop the verbal response that they most want to give. Some of the staff are still working on that one. They also came up with the emotion wheel. We tried the emotion thermometer and various visuals. The emotion wheel, the children felt, worked best for them. It works in terms of you've got high arousal and low arousal, positive and negative emotions. They begin to learn to identify. A 1 is where they are organised, they are able to take on board new information, and they can use it. Being a 5, anything, is absolutely fine. 5, excited yellow on Christmas Day, great, but not before a maths lesson. 5, sleepy, great before you go to bed, not when you're doing a reading comprehension. We also got rid of chronological age groups and grouped them according to need. So, for example, Jupiter Base, Key Stage 2, is largely SEMH. As a pattern, they have very disorganised attention and they quite often overload on information. They'll have speech and language difficulties of a certain kind, they'll have working memory deficits. Depending on which class you're in, you're either reactive behaviours or instrumental behaviours, and they have inconsistent cognitive profiles. How we teach those children depends upon their needs. So Jupiter 1 has a common needs profile of those areas. How you teach literacy, numeracy, geography, history, how to play at playtime is dependent on those needs. We've got Mars-based, Key Stage 2, which is broadly social cognition and communication, sensory processing difficulties. They've got that very rigid attention pattern. They notice one thing and they hold on to it no matter what. They'll have very particular speech and language difficulties that are different to Jupiter, and they'll have really spiky working memory profiles. So, for example, Mars 1, they have real clear strengths in visual spatial processing, but real deficits in their verbal working memory. That has a real impact for the absolute basics if you're teaching phonological processing and phonics, and down to if you're teaching column addition. Grouping children this way means that we can really make sure that everything that happens in the classroom, whether it's academic learning or behavioural learning, is absolutely relevant to those children's needs. We're not wasting time teaching children in a way that they can't access. We give really strong opportunities across the whole day. Coming to school is an intervention. So we are constantly teaching them how to do something and then getting them to apply it in as many contexts as possible. Our classroom environments meet the needs of the children. So the children who need reduced stimuli, they're very bare classrooms. We respond to their behaviours in a way that reflects their needs. So when you get rid of sanctions and you don't tell them off anymore, you have to be able to give them feedback. You have to be able to correct the inappropriate behaviours. But how you do that depends on how you know your children think. And we fully understand the whole child rather than just pockets. We are no longer teaching a literacy lesson and trying to fit in speech and language and trying to fit in OT and trying to fit in what the EP says. It's a holistic approach. That means we, as staff, are actually rewarded by the progress they make in ways that we might otherwise miss. Our children's point of view, quite often they've come to us and been told that they're angry. And the big revelation for this little lad was, I'm worried? Really? I thought I was angry. Everybody always told me I was angry. That's worried. That changed how he thought about himself and how he accessed a maths lesson. At the moment, they're working on understanding how they process information. So this is assembly tasks in groups with the whole school. One group of children have described their information processing difficulty as this. The information is like cars. Some of it comes really quick, some of it comes really slow, some of it crashes, some of it gets stuck, it gets jumbled up. When that happens, it makes them feel disorganised. They can't think in an organised way about what they need to be learning. That makes them over-aroused. Another group of children came up with, actually it's sensory information. When things are too loud, too noisy, too bright, too dark, too many colours, too much talking, we get over-aroused then we get disorganised. So what have we learnt? All of our children have Ds as labels. They have lists of them. It doesn't help. It doesn't give you actually what you do in the classroom. You have to understand the whole profile of functioning and how different areas interact. If it's not working, don't do more of the same. And there is always an answer. Neuroscience has given us an awful lot of answers. The hard bit was actually knowing what to do with it in terms of being in the classroom. Ooh. Ah. See, you shouldn't do IT. So now we've got an ethos and a school culture. It expects children to start from where they are, not where we think they should be. We don't do sanctions. We're questioning rewards, actually. As soon as you have a reward system, if a child has decided they should have earned the reward and you don't give it to them, it's a sanction. So we're trying to work that one through at the moment. We've got happy children, which is a big deal for them, and they're learning. And they are becoming more functionally independent, which for us is an important thing for them for later life. We have very, very few instances of the level of behaviour that mean there's damage or escalated physical control. We've also gone from 35 to 55 pupils in 18 months. And we have staff who say they feel skilled and positively challenged by being in our place. So in short, now we work. We went through a really rocky few years where we knew it wasn't working, but we didn't know what to do. But now it works because actually we started from where the children are. Thank you.